Well, we're starting off our series of guitar setups here for GuitaristDoneRight.com. And this is a customer's Glarry Telecaster. Glarry sells very inexpensive guitars that are surprisingly good quality. But like any guitar, I don't care how much you spend, when it's new, you first get it off the shelf, or whether you buy it used, it's going to need a setup most likely. This one was no exception. The customer tried to do his own setup, and by looking at it here, I see he's got a few things off kilter a bit, and he broke an E string, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back for him. He broke down and called me. So let's help him out and help you out there too. If you're wondering if you should be able to do your own setup, I would say sure, why not? I would leave the filing of nut slots and leveling and crowning of frets to a professional, unless you're very adventurous and you understand that you may have a catastrophic failure if one little mistake happens. Everything else you really should be able to do on your own. And so let's get started here. The first thing I do when I have a guitar, here, let's give you a look at this guitar here, if I can get my tiny little camera going here, and just kind of take a look at this Glarry. So the first thing I like to do is just look the guitar over end to end. And if it's a guitar you've been playing a while, try to look at it with fresh eyes, you know, because you're used to maybe overlooking things, and just look for anything out of the ordinary. I also look to see that the strings are running fairly parallel to the edges of the fretboard. I look to see how the saddles are adjusted. In this case, they're very high, so then I'm going to look at the action. The action looks very low. So that concerns me a little. If we have to have the saddle so high for the right kind of action, maybe we're going to run out of adjustment and we might need a neck shim. I'm not saying that we do. We'll look into that. And just look for cracks, look for just anything that might be needing attention. And in this case, everything looks pretty good. I mean, the finish, of course, has got maybe a little issue if you don't like this dark line through the wood, but I think it's a pretty good looking guitar, especially at $71, you know. Next thing we're going to do is plug the guitar in and see what works. Now, I've got the three-way selector in the middle position, so both pickups should be hot. So everything's working right. Its pickup's dead when it should be dead. It's alive when it should be alive. Let's make sure our tone works. Kinda. Volume works. No scratchiness. So we passed that test okay. Always tune your guitar before beginning measurements, because when the guitar is tuned, you'll have the tension exactly the same as it will be when you're playing the guitar. And those are the measurements that count. When you release the tension on your strings, your neck may straighten out a little bit, causing less relief and causing your measurements of even nut slots and string height to be off. So what is the relief, you might ask? Relief is the clearance we're going to have when we fret at the first fret and the last fret, and there should be just a little bit of bow in the neck, so that when we measure at, say, the 7th fret, we have just a little bit of room here, about 10,000ths of an inch. And in this case, I can see, even without my measuring thing, we have 0. The neck is either back bowed or at least too straight, perhaps back bowed. And that's true across all the strings. So, either the neck is bowed or there's too much tension in the truss rod that's causing the bow. So we're going to hope it can be adjusted out with a truss rod, and I hope they put a double action truss rod in here. It seems our customer, who tried to do his own setup, has stripped the truss rod nut. So now we'll check the nut slot heights. And I'll fret at the last highest fret toward the body and measure each string from the bottom of the string to the top of the fret. And I'm looking for, at least 10,000ths, the 15,000ths or so. And if we have too much clearance, we won't get the right intonation. It'll be sharp when we play up in the first 5 frets, the cowboy frets. And if we don't have enough clearance, like less than 10,000ths of an inch, we may start getting a buzzing when we play the open strings. So neither one of those are good. So we're looking for, I like to have it between 10 and 15,000ths of an inch clearance. And we can look for a little more clearance for the heavy strings, which will vibrate in a wider wave. And we can do with a little less clearance on the unwound strings, or the G, B, and E. Okay, bring you up to date. We have checked the nut slots, and the heights were good. These slots were cut beautifully. We did not do the string height. I could tell we were going to have problems there. But the first thing you do when you're doing a setup is you set your relief. And had to do things a little differently here because I had previously looked at this guitar. The customer had stripped the truss rod nut, trying to do his own setup. And the thing, it's easy to strip a truss nut if you get the wrong wrench, or you don't have the right pressure, and if you don't know what you're doing. But in an inexpensive guitar, where they tend to use really cheap screws and nuts, meaning soft metal, it's even easier to strip that nut. And it's not something I recommend people do on their own. Unless you really know what you're doing, you know you have the right size wrench, and if you have a decent guitar and you're careful, you could do it then. But when you have an inexpensive guitar that's going to have soft metal for the truss nut, and if you're not experienced in doing it, man, you really have to be careful. Anyway, so the nut is stripped. The guitar is not worth extracting the nut. So what we're going to do, the neck is back bowed, just a little bit. So what we're going to do for him is we're going to continue the setup, but instead of 9s, we're going to put strings of gauge 10 on here, which should pull 15, 18 pounds more tension. And if not right away, and probably not right away, but in time, it may help put a little bit of relief back into the neck. And in the meantime, to compensate for the back bow, we'll probably have to increase the string height a little bit to avoid buzzing. We'll see when we get there. Now, before putting the string guides back on, you might want to do something smart and use some expensive nut grease or something, because this is the largest friction point you have in the whole system. So especially if you're bending strings or using a tremolo, but even just for general playing and making notes and chords, for your strings to come back to the right position for tuning, you don't want any friction. And these string guides, pressing down hard on the strings here on your headstock, they provide a lot of friction, way more than your saddles or your nut. So, smart idea, use a little nut grease on them. Maybe a smarter idea is to use something you probably already have around the home. Let's see if I can get this. This is what I use, chapstick. And you want to use it judiciously. You know, you don't want something that'll catch dirt and grit. Just enough to get rid of the friction here along the guides. And then we'll install the string guides back on. Now I use one of these foam sanding blocks, and I'll just take some of the sharpness off the fret ends. There. Now, if this were my guitar, I really might consider a few coats of True Oil to protect the wood, because this bare wood is just going to absorb sweat, dirt, and so forth, and it's in a very short period of time, it's going to look a little grimy. Now let's check the frets to be sure they're level. That's can be one of the biggest problems with the guitar, is buzzing due to a high fret end or just a high fret somewhere. So it's best to track them down with the strings off. And this is something that can happen. You might get a new guitar that's perfectly level, and then in time find out that you've sprouted a fret end that's popped up a few thousandths high. And a few thousandths doesn't sound like a lot, but it's enough to cause problems. I'll actually be surprised if I don't find a high fret or high fret end. So far, so good. These are very soft frets. They have scratches in them already. I'm probably adding a few. And that's not normal. These are very soft frets. And what that means, by the way, they're all level. Good for you, Glarry. What the soft fret metal means is these frets are going to wear very fast. You're going to start getting grooves in them and so forth, and they're going to need leveling and crowning. But because they're soft, it may not be worth leveling and crowning because they're going to wear again quickly. They really need fret replacements, but that's hardly worth it on a $70 guitar. Okay, we've got level frets. We've got our fret ends smoothed out. Let's check the jack. Be sure it feels nice and tight. Okay, that's good. Let's check our tuner keys. Be sure they're nice and tight. That's another problem area that we often find, is especially with the 10mm nuts, we find they're frequently loose. Let's see what we get here. I'm not left-handed, so oh wow, yeah, they're loose. Woo, very loose. Wow, look at that. So with nines, if you use 9-gauge strings and you're tuned, you've got in the neighborhood of 90 pounds of tension pulling on these posts. And with the nuts loose, you know, you could probably get some tuning issues. So that's something you want to watch. Even on good Fender guitars, these nuts get loose. Okay, let's check other things for looseness, like strap buttons. Sometimes on an older guitar, you'll find that the wood, basswood, and the other woods used for bodies are soft, and the threads will get loose, and you really can't tighten the screw anymore. When that happens, remove the screw, get your tight bond glue and a toothpick, stick the toothpick in the hole, cut it off, screw your strap button back in, screw your strap button back in, and you're good for a few more years. Alright, let's check this one. That's good. Let's check our neck plate. One screw moved a little, the other three are fine. Now I'll check the back of the tuner keys to be sure they're tight. Always be sure to use the right size screwdriver tip. It's so easy to strip screws, so easy to strip the screws, and you just don't want to do that. Okay, so we're looking good there. We're about ready to put strings on this thing. Let's clean the guitar and polish the frets a bit and see if we can clean up the fretboard a little. Well, we did get a little dirt off. Now, on a lot of guitars, I get my Dremel tool, buffing wheel, and some rouge, and I'd really polish up these frets. But rouge is an abrasive, and these are very soft frets. So I'm afraid I'd take a bit of the life out of them by doing any more than just the car polish, which has really shined them up nicely. Okay, it's time to put strings on. And again, to help pull that bow back into the neck, we're going to go with a little bit slightly heavier strings than we normally would. I'd normally go with 9s on a Strat or a Telecaster. In this case, we're going to put 10s on and pull about 15 pounds more pressure, which I think will help in time. I like to get the holes for the tuner key for the string going about roughly 90 degrees or a little more. Feed the string through, and then I'll use my hand roughly at the 12th fret to get about that much string, and we'll do a thing like this to make a sharp crease. Snip off a bit, and then I'll use my atomic powered string winder, and I'll keep a good bit of tension on the string while we're winding. And before I let it get tight, I'll look back at the saddle and make sure we're still sitting properly on it. Now here we're starting our unwound strings, and you might want to do them just a little differently. I think this is what some people might call the sailor's knot, I don't know. This time, our first time around, we'll go over the end of the string, and then we'll go under the wind for everything else. Looking back at the saddle, be sure we're still routed properly, and get that thing under the string guide. There we go. Now the fun starts. What we'll do, I'll roughly get some tension in them. And I'll stretch them. And then I'll tune them. And then we'll go through about 6 or 8 more rounds of stretching. I stretch and retune, stretch and retune until I don't have to retune, until the stretching really didn't change the tuning. Then I know I've stretched enough and I'm good to go. Although after setting a few hours, you might find that your new strings have recontracted somewhat and have gone sharp on you. So you may need to go through one more tuning session. I have a digital tuner, but I really think that's overkill for setting up a guitar. Just I use Pro Guitar Tuner, and I went ahead and paid them, so I have the ability to tune different kinds of instruments. And I'll go ahead and tune. And we don't have to get exact at this point. And you may find, once you've gone through and you finish tuning your high E, you may find that you're now flat again on your wound strings, like that. And that just has to do with a bit of twisting on the neck. Okay, that's close enough, because all we're doing at this point is stretching. We're going to stretch and tune and stretch and tune. As you stretch, you'll make the string go flat. As you see, we had this one tuned. It was E, now it's D. And with each cycle, it should drop less and less until eventually it doesn't drop enough to even worry about. And that's when you know you've stretched enough. Now, you want to be careful on your high E. I guess I'm pulling it up close to 1 inch, but that's about it. And then I'm jiggling around a little bit, kind of get a feel for it. I guess after you've broken a couple dozen high E strings, you get a feel for how much they can take. So what's this, about the 3rd round, 2nd or 3rd? Still dropping flat on the E. I should put this, maybe that's better. you can see I'm not really worried about getting the tuning exact, because what we're doing is stretching the strings. That's the most important part of this operation. So getting right on the money on tuning is just irrelevant. Just get in the ballpark. What you're looking for is how much you're dropping off after the stretch. Alright, we're doing pretty good on the unwounds. Let's see if we can get a little more out of the wounds. Just for the heck of it, let me double check G here. Yeah, it fell off a little. I think we're there, except for low E. Let's give him one more stretch. Okay, now we're going to double check. We're going to get the string height set. Then after the string height, we'll double check tuning, because we'll get the tuning out when we change the string height. Again, what we just did wasn't to tune the strings really, it was just to stretch them so they'll be stable, stabilize the strings. So I'm going to work on string height now, which means I'll put a capo on the first fret. And I'm going to be measuring at the 17th fret. Two reasons we use the capo. One is just to take the nut out of the picture. So if you have a high nut, low nut, whatever, it just won't make any difference when you're measuring your string height because there's no nut in this equation. The other reason I use a capo is so that I'm always measuring every guitar the same way by the same yardstick. So that if I have a guitar that I like the string height at a certain setting, and I get another guitar like it, I can put it at the same setting and be pretty well satisfied that it's going to feel the same. So before you do any measuring, it's important to have the strings tuned, because we'll have the same tension as when we're playing. And I have the capo on the first fret, so I'm going to measure at the 17th fret, and I'm looking pretty good. I'm getting about 60 thousandths, maybe just a little more than 60 on the low E, same on A. I'm a little too high on D. I'm up at 70 thousandths, so I want to fix that. And I'll use my hex wrench, 16th inch. And I'm going to come down just a little bit on D. Measure at the 17th fret. I'm going to hold these strings down so they're not in my way. And I'm looking pretty good now. I'm checking G and I'm too high. I'm up at 70 thousandths again. So we're going to bring the other end of the saddle down. And since this is the old style saddles, just 3 saddles for 6 strings, I want to be careful that when I change one end, it doesn't change my height at the other end. So I'm checking for that too. I'll go back and I went back and checked D after I set G. Okay, I'm way high on B, almost at 80, or I am at 80 thousandths. So we're going to bring B down. And just looking, I can see that the high E is way up. I'm going to go ahead and make the saddle appear parallel to the body, which should get me in the ballpark. Okay, I'm looking good. I'm at 60 thousandths on B. I'm still high on high E. There we go. I'm looking good all across the board now. Now we'll retune the guitar. Don't forget to take the capo off before you tune it. Of course, I have never forgotten, more than 100 times. And so after I tune, we'll work on intonation. This time, now tuning becomes more important. So I'm going to hold the guitar like a player would. And that means I want the neck supported. And since, excuse my head, since my hand might be needed, I'll put something under it there. Okay, now I'm tuned. When you finish the high E, come back and check your low strings. Now D's a little sharp. When that happens, detune and then bring it, I'll always bring it up to tune, never detune to the 0 mark. Okay. All right, now we're going to intonate, and all that means is when I play an open string and I get its note, E in this case, I should get an E an octave higher at the 12th fret. And we're very sharp. Now, if you're sharp, what does that mean? That means your string is too short. If your string is too short, you can lengthen the string with the screw that adjusts the saddle. And we're going to lengthen the string by tightening the screw, which will bring the saddle back, which brings the saddle rearward. And I'm not too delicate about how I do that. We were pretty sharp, and I probably have not lengthened the string enough. Okay, now we're a little sharp on open tune, of course. And alright, I'm 10 cents sharper at the 12th than I am open. So I've got a ways to go here again. If you find that you have a lot of tension on the screw, loosen your string, then tighten the screw, and then retune. Because you don't want to take a chance of stripping the screw. Now, you see I brought this saddle back quite a bit, maybe 3/8 of an inch altogether. about a nickel sharp. That's good. Now, altogether, we've moved that a good ½ an inch, I'll bet. It was a little ahead, I think, of the A. Okay, no, we've moved it 3/8 of an inch. But that's considerable movement. Now, I'm just going to assume, I'm going to loosen the A string. And I'm just, not the A string. Yeah, I'm going to loosen the A string because it's on the same saddle, so I've sharpened it. Quite a bit. Oh, and A is beautifully intonated as well. Good thing, because they're on the same saddle. If not, we'd have to make a compromise between the E and the A and just get them as close as we could. What I'm going to do now is loosen D and G, because I'm just going to anticipate that those strings are too short also. And I'm going to get them in a ballpark of what experience tells me they're probably going to need to be, and then we'll start checking. I guessed right on the money for D, and let's hope G's the same. G's a little sharp open. Yep, it's a little sharp on the 12th fret too. So this is one of those where we're going to call for maybe a compromise between D and G, because D was already good, but G is too sharp. So I'll try to get them where they're both off equal amounts. D's about 2 cents short, flat, and G's about 3 cents sharp. So I think we're going to live with that. Now we're going to go to B. It's 20 cents sharp. So we're going to loosen it to give us a little room to pull that screw back without fighting tension. And we're going to bring it back within about 1/8 of an inch of the others. The higher strings don't need to be as long as the shorter ones by an amount that has a ratio to the thickness of the string, and I don't remember how it works, but I can ballpark it. Oh, right on the money. Right on the money. So there you go. That's how you intonate a guitar. So now let's set the pickup height. We want the pickups to be about between 3/30 seconds and 4/30 seconds. In other words, 1/8 of an inch gap. We're a little too close here on our neck pickup, so I'm going to lower the high end just a little bit. Oh, when you measure, you want to fret at the highest fret, your last fret on the neck. And, oh, somebody's banging pans. Yeah, we're good there. We're good here. We're way too far off here on the low side, so let's bring that up. There, I like that. We're good to go. Now let's check to be sure we have a good ground on our bridge. I'm going to turn the ohm meter on, and I'm going to put one of my probes into the ground part of the jack, and with the other one I'll touch the strings. And if you can see the meter over there, we're at 0 ohms, which is perfect. That means we have a good ground. I use a whiteboard to track my progress on setups. Red denotes any problems. Green denotes where I've made changes. Brown is just what it was. And I'm ready to check off intonation here. Boom. That's the last item on the chart. So time to grab another cup of coffee. Okay, now let's see how this thing sounds. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Not much of a secret around here. I'm not really a guitar player. I would just work on it. But let's see what we got. Got that tone cut down there. What is it, $900 Fender Nashville Deluxe. See what it sounds like. The money doesn't make you a better guitar player. So there you have it, $900 $71. And I got a good deal on this one because its owner had also stripped its truss rod nut. A little harder to do on a good quality guitar, but quite doable on any of them. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope maybe it's given you some pointers if you want to try setting up your own guitar at home. Right now, the guitar stores are closed. We're going through the pandemic thing. I hope you all are well and everybody's okay. But it's a good time to pull out the guitar and get the rust knocked off. Shouldn't take long to get better than I am. And but tune the old guitar up and set it up. It'll sound better, it'll play better, you'll feel better, and keep playing. Thank you.